So the question I said I would deal with today is, why do we have so many gods? And in a land with so many gods, what is our obligation? What is our duty? Whom should we worship and why? So to understand that, we will have to go back into the history of the subcontinent, where there was tremendous diversity. And the extent of diversity can hardly be imagined, but you can see that in a country where every 500 miles, the language changes. Every 500 miles, the forms of worship change. Every uh, town may have its own Gram Dev or Gram Devi, and where you have a panoply of faiths. So the reason is that India was a subcontinent where it acted as a fertile land for all new religions. So just like Silicon Valley today in the United States is the home of startup companies, you can say that India at one point in time was a home for startup religions. And therefore, so many religions came up, both in following the Vedic tradition and those that were opposed to the Vedic tradition and those that were indifferent to the Vedic tradition. And thus, there were so many various forms of faiths, but uniquely, every one of them was respected. And tomorrow, if you wanted to start a religion in those days, you would be given full encouragement if you could find enough followers. And even today, we have many new age gurus who cannot be identified with any particular religion, but they are creating their own religious followings. So this is the greatness of India and the ability of India to create and grow more and more religions. Further, it has been described by Malhotra that, there is what he called as a grab bag of meditational techniques and methods. So you can start your own religion, your own sampradaya by dipping into them and picking up different meditational techniques and all, which are freely available to everybody. It's an open source. So really, it's an open source environment. Just like in IT, you have open source, you have an open source environment in religion where you can pick up what you want and what you wish to do. But if you go far back in time and you go to perhaps the first or the earliest Purana, you will find out that the earliest Purana points out how the Puranas are stratified, how the Puranas are divided, and also who is attracted to what form of worship. So if you go to the Bhagavad Gita itself, in chapter 17, text number 4, Krishna gives the answer to Arjuna. And Arjuna's question is very clear right in the beginning of the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. In the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is asked by Arjuna, that what are people attracted to? People who do not follow the scripture. What do they do? Arjuna vacha yah shastra vidhim utsrijaya yajante shraddhayan vitah Tesham nishta tu ka Krishna Sattvam aho rajastamaha. So in 17.1, Arjuna asked Krishna, "O Krishna, what is the situation of one who does not follow the principles of scripture but worships according to his own imagination? Is he in goodness? Is he in passion? Or is he in ignorance?" So this is very important, that people who do not follow standard scripture and worship according to their own imagination, how do they worship? And Krishna answers and says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Tri Vidha Bhavati Shraddha Dehinam Sa Swabhavaja Satviki Rajasi Chaiva Tamasi Cheti Tam Shrinu. The Supreme Lord said, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Let's hear about these. So Krishna has earlier pointed out that we are made up not just of the individual soul, which is part of Krishna's superior energy, but we are also made up of Bhumi, Apo, Nalo, Vayur, Kham, Mano, Buddhi, Revacha, Ahankara, Ityam, Me, Binna, Prakriti, Ashtada. That earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, all of these, he points out, are really in the form of his inferior energies. So these inferior energies, Krishna has further described in the Bhagavad Gita, are divided into Sattvagun, or the mode of goodness, Rajagun, which is in the mode of passion, and Tamagun, which is in the mode of ignorance. And here, Krishna points out, Sattvana Rupa Sarvasya Shraddha Bhavati Bharata Shraddha Mayo Yam Purusho Yo Yat Shraddha Sa Eva Saha. So according these three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, are constantly battling it out in every human being. At some times, Sattva is predominant, at other times, Rajas is predominant, at other times, Tamagun is predominant. And Krishna points out here that for those who are functioning largely in Sattvagun, they will worship in one way. Those who are functioning largely in Rajagun will function in another way. And those who are functioning in Tamagun will largely worship in a different way. And what are these ways in which they worship? And Krishna points out in text 4 of the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Yajante Satvika Devan Yaksha Raksanshi Rajasah Pretan Bhut Ganauschanya Yajante Tamasa Janaha. So men who are in Sattvagun, men who are in the mode of goodness, they worship the Devtas. Yajante Satvika Devan. Those who are in the mode of Rajagun, or those who are in the mode of passion, they naturally are attracted to the worship of demons. Yaksha Rakshamsi Rajasaha. This is not unusual, or this is not strange, though perhaps in the urban areas we might find some difficulty in identifying people who do that. I have visited smaller towns, even a large city like, let's say, Mangalore, where people are worshipping demons in search or while seeking material benefits. So Krishna says those who worship the Devtas, they are in Sattvagun naturally. They seek out the Devtas. Those who are in the mode of Rajagun, they worship the demons. And then he says, Pretan Bhuta Ganauschanya Yajante Tamasa Janaha. So men who are in the mode of, and women who are in the mode of ignorance, they worship Preta Bhuta Ganaschanye. So they worship the ghosts and the spirits. So this is the natural attraction of the gunas. This is the natural attraction of those who, without following the scripture, engage in worship according to the gunas that are predominant within them. Those who are sattvic, where sattva gun is predominant, they worship the devatas. Those who are rajasic, they worship the yakshas and the demons. Those who are tamasic, they worship the preta, bhuta, ganaschani, which is they worship various kinds of ghosts and spirits. So, to understand how to remedy that, Ved Vyasa wrote 18 Puranas. And in these 18 Puranas, you have a further explanation of how people should worship. So if you go to see, the earliest of these 18 Puranas is known as the Matsyapuran. And when you talk about the Matsyapuran explains very clearly that there are 18 Puranas. Now, all of them have been prepared by Ved Vyas. And these 18 Puranas were meant to attract people who were not studying other scriptures, the original scriptures, and who therefore were attracted to worshipping devatas, those who were used to worshipping the ghosts and the spirits, those who were worshipping demons. To give them some structure of worship, Ved Vyas prepared 18 Puranas. For those who were in Tamaguna, he prepared 6 Puranas so that those who were in Tamaguna would be put into a structure of worship and would begin to evolve spiritually. So Tamagoni scriptures, or scriptures that are prepared for those who are in Tamagun, of course they were prepared by Ved Vyas, who is an incarnation of God. And they talk about God, who of course is also transcendental. But in order to attract those people who are naturally attracted to worship ghosts and spirits, Bhoot and Preta, he invited them to worship Bhutanatha, the Lord of the ghosts and spirits, and the consort of Bhutanatha. So who is Bhutanatha? I think all of you know that Bhutanatha is none other than Lord Shiva. And why is Shiva attractive to those people who are in Tamagun? He is attractive especially to those who are in Tamagun, and you can see that when you watch the Naga Babas. They roam around naked. Their bodies are smeared with ash. They wear the Shaivite mark on their forehead. And of course, who do you expect them to worship? They worship Bhutanath. And an essential part of that worship is that they must take intoxicants. Many years ago, I was walking up a mountainside in Alibag, where there are temples on the top. And someone advised me, why don't you go and visit this sadhu? He is very, very saintly. So I said, all right, where is he? So we went to visit him. And we found a guy smeared with ash who had a chillam in his hand and who was smoking, obviously charas, ganja, whatever. And so I asked him, I said that you are a sadhu. You are apparently aware of what you're doing. But why are you going and smoking intoxicants like charas? So so the sadhu explained to me, he was an erudite sadhu, and he took out Shaivite agamas and sutras, and before me he delineated verses and sections where he pointed out that one cannot worship Shiva unless one is taking intoxicants. So without taking intoxicants, the worship of Shiva is impossible. Therefore, he says, I am smoking ganja and charas. He says, don't you know, have you never attended any Shivratri? Have you not been offered bhang? Is that not an intoxicant? So you should understand that. So the worship of Shiva and the six Puranas that mention the worship of Shiva and Devi, they are designed for those people who are in Tamagun and naturally attracted to the taking of intoxicants, remaining unclean, smeared by ashes, who they enjoy taking bhang on Shivratri. And thus, you will find that right now in the south and in a good part of India, Shankaracharya, Bhagwan Shankaracharya, came and purified all these forms of worship of Shiva. And therefore, in the south, you will not find it, especially in the south, and even to a good part of the rest of India. But as you move towards the northeast, you will find their worship becoming even more tamasic and even more designed towards tamasic ways. There is no question of Bali or animal sacrifice in any of the South Indian temples of Shiva because they have been purified and sanitized by the philosophy of Shankaracharya. But if you go to Pashupatinath in Nepal, you will find that in Pashupatinath there is a standard ritual sacrifice of a buffalo calf where they cut off the head of the buffalo calf with a single stroke. This is very typical. And this typical behavior this violent behavior, this typical behavior is typical of people who are in Tamagun and who are attracted to the eating of flesh. So animal sacrifice, taking of intoxicants, these you will find in the Shaivite agamas and sutras. You will also find animal sacrifice in Shaivite temples, which have not reformed or have not become purified by Shankaracharya. Similarly, in the worship of Devi, the worship of Devi or Mata consists of the 5 Mas which are required for the worship. And what are the 5 Mas that are required for the worship of Mata? The 5 Mas that are required for the worship of Mata are, number 1, Mas, which means flesh. You have to have meat if you are worshipping Mata. If you go even to Calcutta, you will find that there is a Kali temple there. And traditionally, they continue to sacrifice animals to Kali. This is a very tamasic attitude. This attracts people in Tamagun who are attracted to the taste of blood and they are attracted to the worship of Kali. So, mas or the eating of flesh, you will find in a Kali temple. But apparently, there is a reason behind how this Kali Prasad is offered and eaten. When you are cutting off the goat, the head of the goat, which is usually done on Amavasya day, that is once a month, you have to say a mantra in the ear of the goat. And in the ear of the goat, you have to say that, my dear goat, in this life I am sacrificing you. In the next life, you may sacrifice me. So this animal bali is characteristic of Tamagoni people, and you will find it in those who are worshippers of Kali. Even you can look at the face of Kali, or you can look at the ghoulish expression of Kali with her tongue out and so many other ghoulish appearances. Who would be attracted to such a ghoulish appearance of Kali unless one is specifically in Tamagun? In addition to Mass, it is necessary in the worship of Ma to have Madira. Madira means to take alcohol. So not only must you have Mass, but you must have Madira, or you must consume alcohol. Alcohol is another substance which is tremendously attractive to those who are in Tamagun. They cannot do without it. And it actually fosters Tamagun and is the target of those who are in Tamagun. So Madira, Masa and Madira, these are very two typical of the two Mas. The third Ma is called Maithuna. Maithuna means that one has illicit sexual activity. And in these gatherings, where there is worship of the Devi, according to tradition, not according to the modern sanitized and purified forms by Adi Shankaracharya, Maithuna means having illicit sexual activity, not with your own spouse, but with someone else. This is not Swakiya Ras, this is called Parakiya Ras. And this illicit sexual activity is also taken to be attractive to those who are in Tamagun. Matsya. Matsya is another of the Mas that are required for the worship of Devi or Mata. And Matsya means to have fish. So not only should you have Masa, but you also have Madira, and you must have Matsya. You must have illicit sexual activity, which is Maithuna. And lastly, there should be Mura, or what is known as parched rice. And this Muri or Mura, which you have to take, is also part of the worship of Devi. So these are the 6 Puranas that seek to purify those who are in Tamaguna. Because those who are in Tamaguna are naturally attracted to the worship of the ghosts and the spirits of the Bhut and the Preta, they are instead attracted away from the Bhut and Preta to the worship of Bhutanath and Devi. And thus you can see in these 6 scriptures that they are essentially meant for those who are in Tamagun. Then there are 6 Puranas that are meant for those who are in Rajagun. And these gods who are worshipped by those in Rajagun are worshipped for the fulfillment of material objectives. They are designed specifically for overcoming obstacles that you might meet in material life. It's also designed for attaining whatever fruits you are seeking in the material world. And thus, the gods that are worshipped in the middle 6 Puranas are meant for those who are in Rajagun. And these Rajaguni people, as Bhagavad Gita says, are naturally attracted to the worship of the demons. But instead of being worshipping the demons, these 6 Puranas encourage you to worship the gods who are featured in these 6 Puranas, which are meant for those who are in Rajagun, so that they may move from worship of ghosts and spirits, they will move to the worship of Shiva and Devi. For those who are in the worship of demons, they may move to the worship of other gods described in the 6 Puranas, which are meant for those who are in Rajagun. And then, for those who are in Sattva Guna, Krishna points out these people are naturally attracted to the worship of the Devatas. So these people who are in Sattva Guna and naturally attracted to the worship of the Devatas, there appear the 6 Puranas which direct you towards the worship of Vishnu and his incarnation. Therefore, for the worship of Rama, Krishna, Hari, for the worship of all the incarnations of Vishnu, you will find the 6 Puranas, which are meant for those who are in Sattva Guna. So that instead of going and worshipping those people who are, shall we say, demons, or rather, instead of worshipping demons, they are advised to worship those gods in the 6 Puranas that fulfill material objectives. Those who worship ghouls and demons, ghouls and ghosts, they are advised to worship Shiva and Devi, and thus they are attracted there. And those who are in Sattvagun, who are attracted to the worship of Devatas naturally, are being attracted towards the worship of Vishnu and his incarnations, Rama, Krishna, Hari. So this is how the 18 Puranas came about. 6 for those who are predominantly in Tamagun, 6 for those who are predominantly in Rajagun, and 6 for those who are predominantly in Sattvagun. And thus there came about the stratification of worship between the worship of Shiva, Devi, various devatas who may be found, or various gods who are being worshipped for material benefits, and you have, of course, the worship of Vishnu and the incarnations of Vishnu, where one is gradually directed to move from worshipping for material desire and fruit and direct them towards performing their duty and surrendering unto Bhagavan. In the Bhagavad Gita, right, Krishna points out very clearly that there are many forms of worship. And although you are, likely, or shall we say, inclined to worship those who fulfill your material desires, you are really advised by the Bhagavad Gita to worship the one Lord, that is Krishna. So, in chapter 7, verse number 20, Krishna points out how human beings are naturally attracted to the devatas for fulfilling their material desires. And Krishna says in 7.20, Kamaisthaistha ritagnyana prapadyante anya devata tam niyamamastaya prakritya niyate swaya. Those whose minds are distorted by material desires, they surrender unto the gods, the devatas, and follow rules and regulations of worship according to their nature. So, people who are seeking material desires, kamaisthaistha ritagnyana, those whose hearts are distorted by material desires, they go and they worship those who are devatas according to their specific rules and regulations. Yo yam tanum bhakta shraddhayarchitam ichhati tasya chalam shraddham tam eva vidadamyaham. And Krishna says, I am in everyone's heart as the Paramatma. As soon as one desires to worship the devatas, I don't discourage them. In fact, I make their faith steady so that they can devote themselves to that particular deity. So this is very, very important. You might ask, well, I'm not worshipping according to scripture. I am worshipping according to my own whim and fancy. But how is it that I have such great faith? And the answer is that Krishna seated in your heart gives you that faith to worship whomsoever you want. At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, after telling Arjuna everything that he needs to know, Krishna tells Arjuna, now that I have told you everything that you need to know, yatha ichhasi tatha kuru. Now that you know everything that you need to know, you do as you wish. So this is the love of the Lord for you, that he gives you that freedom. He gives you that choice. He gives you that option. And not only he gives you that option, but if you choose to worship someone else other than Krishna, Krishna seated in your heart will make your faith steady and strengthen your faith so that you can worship that deity whom you wish to worship. And then Krishna says in 7.22, Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas Tasya Aradhanam Ihate Labate Cha Tatah Kaman Mayaveva Vihitan Hitan. Then endowed with that faith which I have given him, he seeks the favor of that particular Devta or God, and he obtains his desires. But in actual fact, while he imagines that those desires have been fulfilled by that object of his worship, in truth, he says, Maya eva vihitan hitan, these benefits, the fruits that he gets, are actually bestowed by me and me alone. And therefore, Krishna points out in text 7.23, Antavattu phalam tesham tad bhavatya alpamedasam devan deva yajo yanti mad bhakta yanti mamapi. So people with small intelligence worship the devtas. With small intelligence, you worship the devtas. And those who worship the devtas after leaving this physical body go to the planets of the devtas. But my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. This is so important. Krishna points out that those who are worshipping other devtas, they go to the planet of those devtas. And not only do they go to the planet of those devtas, but then they must return. In the Bhagavad Gita, elsewhere, Krishna says, Te tam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam kshine punya martyalokam vishanti. That those who worship, let us say Indra, they go to Swargalok, and having enjoyed their and exhausted their credits, and having exhausted their pious deeds, they are born again on this earth into the cycle of birth and death. So yanti deva vrata devan, pitran yanti pitravrata, bhutani yanti bhuteja, yanti madhyajno api mam. So Krishna also declares, those who worship the devtas, they go to the abode of the devtas. Yanti deva vrata devan. Pitran yanti pitrvrata. There are those who worship their ancestors, their departed relatives. So they go to Pitralok. Bhutani yanti bhuteja. Then, as pointed out earlier, there are those who worship the ghosts and the spirits. They are reborn in that abode of ghosts and spirits. But Krishna says, Yanti madhyajno apimam. But it is those who worship me who come to me. So those who worship Krishna go to Krishna. Those who worship Devatas go to Devatas. Those who go worship Pitris, they go to their ancestral, where their ancestors are residing. Pitralo. Those who are worshipping bhutas or ghosts, they go to the abode of the ghosts. But those who worship me, Krishna says, they come to me. Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartino arjuna mam upetya tu kaunteya punarjanmana vidyate. And he explains right from Brahmalok downwards, all the planetary systems are places of temporary abode where you go and you must come back onto this earth. Brahma Bhuvanan Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. They always come back into this earth for rebirth, birth and death and old age and disease and fault and misfortune and everything. But Mamupetya tu kaunteya punarjanmana vidyate. But those who come to me, who worship me and who come to me, they never return. Therefore, Krishna says, Ashraddhana Purusha Dharmasyasya Parantapa Aprapya Mam Nivartante Mrityu Sansara Vartmani. Clearly, he points out that those who have no faith in me, they cannot continue on this path. They must come back again onto this earth, into the cycle of birth and death. So, it's very clear, Krishna has pointed out. And Krishna has clearly emphasized that the worship of other gods is done because you are in Rajagun, in Tamagun, in Satagun. And you are attracted to the worship of Devatas, you are attracted to the worship of ghosts and spirits, you are attracted to the worship of demons. And those who continue in that mode, for them different Puranas are mentioned to gradually elevate them to the worship of Bhagavan Shri Krishna. But those who are enlightened, those who have a teacher, those who are students of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna very clearly points out, they worship Krishna and go to him from where there is no return. So Krishna points out, Yepi anya devata bhakta yajante shraddhayanvita tepi mameva kaunteya yajante avidhi purvakam. Krishna points out that those who are worshipping other gods, full of faith, they don't realize that that faith and that worship is meant for me alone. Aham hi sarva yajnanam bhokta cha prabhureva cha mam tu mam abhijanati tatvena taschavanti te. Krishna points out, he is the sole recipient of all worship and sacrifice. Aham hi sarva yajnanam bhokta cha prabhureva cha. And those who worship him, they eventually go back to him. So, I have tried to encompass why we see so many gods and how we should worship. In fact, it doesn't matter if you have desires, whether you have no desire, whether you have desire for moksha, whether you're full of desire. In all circumstances, you must worship Rama, Krishna, Hari. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. When you worship Bhagwan, what Bhagwan does is that not only does he fulfill your desires, he sees to it that you have no further desires. This is the example of Dhruv, who wanted a kingdom greater than his grandfather's. And when he worshipped Bhagwan, Bhagwan eventually gave him that. And he said, no, now that I have found you, I was looking for a broken piece of glass, but I found a wish-fulfilling jewel. I don't want what I asked for. Sthan abhilashi tapaso sthito aham tvam praptvan deva muni indra guyam kacham vichinvan api divya ratnam. He says, I don't need anything else now that I have found you. But Krishna says, no, you asked for something, you must have it. And when you have lived out your prarabdha, because once you asked for something, you have to enjoy it. And after that is over, then you can come to me. So this is the nature of Bhagavan. He is the all-purifying one. Whereas those whom you worship will take you to their abode and then bring you back here again. Those who worship Bhagavan, who worship Krishna, Rama, Krishna, Hari, he will take you back beyond the cycle of birth and death. So those who have no faith will come back. Ashraddhadhana purusha dharmasyasya parantapa aprapyamam nivartante mrityu samsara vartmani. Shraddhaval labate jnanam. Those who are having faith to him, God gives him spiritual realization. Tat parat samyat indriyaha jnana labdhva param shantim achirena adhigacchati. So God gives him that spiritual realization, and that gives him eternal peace. So I will now pause and I will take any questions you may have on this subject matter.
Yes, so good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the first question that we have today is that, is it okay to be an atheist yet believe in a higher power?
You're in the wrong class. This is a class meant for Bhagavad Gita and devotees of Krishna. And the Bhagavad Gita specifically enjoins anyone who speaks on Bhagavad Gita not to speak to atheists. So please log out now. This class is not meant for you.
Another question that we have is that, how is, you spoke about Tabagur, how is Tabagur harmful for one's sense of self?
How is?
Tabagur.
How is Tamagun harmful for sense of self? See, identification with Rajagun, Tamagun or Sattvagun, they're all harmful because they create a sense of self, which we don't want. If you want to make spiritual progress, you have to give up your sense of self. So it doesn't matter whether it's Rajagun, Sattvagun or Tamagun. And there's no point in trying to interchange from one to the other. We have to learn to become Gunatita. And a Gunatita person is indifferent to Rajagun, Tamagun and Sattvagun. Prakasham cha pravrittim cha moham eva cha pandava na dveshati sampravritani na nivritani kankshati. So the person who is Gunatit is indifferent to whether Tamagun is there with him, whether Rajagun is there with him, or Sattvagun is there. He crosses all the gunas. So the aim is to cross beyond identification with all three gunas, not to move from one guna to the other. That is the claim of those who have not understood Bhagavad Gita. Yes.
Dr. Shantanu, you of course spoke about Krishna as the supreme being. When it comes to individual beliefs, can all of us have a different relationship with Krishna? Can all of us have a different relationship with God? You know, a lot of people say that, oh, I have a very special relationship with God. So does it differ from person to person?
Yes, everybody can have and will have a different relationship with God until he ceases to exist. So as long as there is a sense of self, there will be a particular relationship with God, which is specific to your sense of self. But as you keep remembering God, being absorbed in God and forgetting self, then there will be a relationship of complete surrender and complete annihilation of self. And that is the supreme. But those who worship Krishna and who still have some sense of self, there are various ways. You can associate with him as a servant of God. That is one form of worship. There are different rasas. So one rasa is to worship him as his servant, called Dasya Ras. Then there are those who see Krishna as his friend. So that is known as Sakhya Ras. There are some who look upon Krishna as their child. So this is called Vatsalya Ras, and so on. So there are various forms of rasas. Don't try to cultivate any of them. They should come naturally and they will be related to your sense of self. But as you forget self by remembering God, that relationship will also melt away. Because you will not be there on this side of the relationship.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Shantanu. I think these were the questions that we have for this week. And if there's something you want to add to the session or tell us what you will cover the next week, you can do that.
So I think we must be very clear that this class is not meant for atheists.
Sure.
This class is not meant for people who are worshipping other gods. This class is meant for those who are reading Bhagavad Gita and are worshippers of Krishna. The rest should not be encouraged to join this class. In fact, should be asked to log out. And if you are very clear on this, then we can progress and we can proceed further into the Bhagavad Gita, which we will do next time. Thank you very much. Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Om.
Thank you. Thank you.